being dependent upon Russia for its energy, for its fuel, for its gas, for us to be able to heat our homes. Energy independence is national security. National security is energy security. And our current administration does not understand that.
Let me pick up on that, Governor, because Harry's talking about national security. We all recall a famous line a few presidential cycles ago about how close Russia is to Alaska. Explain to you guys do have a very unique perspective on how close you are. How does what's happening in Ukraine affect the folks in Alaska, and how does this pertain to the debate and the discussion on energy?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know if folks realize that Alaska was actually owned by the Russians. We were purchased in 1867 by William Seward, Secretary of State, that was brought in under Abraham Lincoln. And it was purchased for $7.2 million. It's actually a pretty good deal for America. But we're literally 2.5 miles from each other. Small island called Little Diamond is Alaska. Big Diamond is Russia. That's 2.5 miles across the international date line. Mainland-wise, we're 50 miles apart. So we are by far the closest state to Russia. And we have flyover incursions by Russian military probably once a month, once every 2 months. So we're very close to the bear, as they say. And the interesting thing, Sean, is the Russians are producing massive amounts of oil and gas in the Arctic. And our own federal government is telling us in Alaska that we can't produce any more oil and gas in the Arctic.
So, I mean, literally, they're out there taking what we can be taking.
Literally, they're out there laughing all the way to the bank.
Yes, they are.
Because of our policies. We are enriching them, we are making them more powerful, we are jeopardizing our own national security, we're sending jobs overseas. And one thing I think we're going to get into is the environmental concerns. They don't have the environmental regulations that the United States does. They don't have the environmental regulations that Alaska has. And so they're unencumbered by that. And again, if you produce here in America, as Harry was saying, if you produce here in America, if you produce in Alaska, you save the environment, you save jobs, you create wealth, and you drive down the cost of energy. We have approximately 24 billion barrels of oil left in the ground in Alaska, about 124 trillion cubic feet of gas in Alaska. That absolutely can drive down the cost of energy and make sure that we are energy independent. So we look out there, we see Russia, we see them producing, and we wonder why our own federal government is actually putting sanctions on states like Wyoming and Alaska.
And as a result, we're getting left behind. And again, it comes back to that energy security and international security. And we can produce coal. We've been producing coal for decades, for hundreds of years. We're able to do it safely. We're able to do it clean. And the fact is that carbon is not the horrible constituent that so many people want to make it out to be. It's plant food. We are not in a situation where we have too much carbon. We've got this idea of global warming and climate change, and what it's really doing is it's making America very, very weak, and it's making our enemies very, very strong, because they're not willing to destroy their economies in their countries for pursuing this radical green environmental agenda.
So, Governor, I want to pick up on that because I didn't realize this. It was funny. We had Congressman Mike Waltz on my show on Newsmax 6 p.m. every night. He'll be here all day, but at 6 o'clock I've got special permission. But it was interesting because Congressman Mike Waltz was talking about how dirty the Russian oil is.
Sure.
Versus, and I feel like that is missing from this discussion. That not only is Biden shutting down, Keystone and preventing drilling in Anwar on federal lands, which hurts all the things that you just mentioned, the jobs and everything else, the wealth creation. But it's also not, it doesn't hold water when it comes to the environmental part of this.
No, not at all. So for example, in Alaska, by state law, we decided not to flare our gas. So we don't flare our gas.
What does that mean?
Well, that's when you see you'll see flames coming out the top of a pipe that's venting gas out of the oil field, so burn it off. So in Russia, in their oil or gas field of Yamal, they have 1,500 wells that are flaring nonstop 24 hours a day. The irony of, and this is what Harry's talked about, is the irony is when you push this stuff overseas, you actually destroy the environment at an accelerated rate. If you do it here in America, you protect the environment. So there used to be a saying, the Russian engineers would come over and take a look at the Alaska pipeline when it was first built, and they'd ask, how much oil goes in it? And we would tell them how much goes in it, and they'd ask, how much comes out of it? And our people would look at them like, well, the same amount that goes in it. And the reason is because in Russia, you don't get the same amount of oil coming out of it because it's leaking throughout various parts of the pipeline that they've built. So the environmental regulations in Russia and across other countries are nothing compared to America, nothing compared to Alaska or Wyoming. And so for those folks that say we're going to save the environment by stopping it here in America, you're going to accelerate the destruction of the environment overseas. That's what's going to happen.
So the thing that
Well, what I would add to that is that it is our prosperity that allows us the luxury of protecting our environment. Go to a third world country and tell me how they protect their environment. We destroy our economy, we destroy our ability to save jobs, we destroy our truckers, we destroy our small businesses. We're not going to have the same prosperity to be able to protect the environment the way that we do. We are a first world country because of the laws that we have and because of our care for that. But really it comes down to one thing, and that is prosperity. And prosperity and national security are absolutely tied to energy independence and energy policy. And this administration is a disaster.
So again, going to raise the cost of doing business here in the United States and in Alaska is just going to cause energy to cost more and make us rely more on our adversaries. The irony is this, Sean. Again, we can pump much more oil in Alaska, but because of the policies of the Biden administration, we're importing more and more oil from Russia, just a couple miles from America.
I mean, look, if you think about what's happened in 12 months, I'm really worried about the industry.
Yeah.
What does the industry look like at the end of 4 years? Because I think Harriet's got a great point. I think that her goal is to try to figure out how to snuff it out as much as possible and then just build windmills.
It'll look like Venezuela. Venezuela was one of the richest countries on the face of the earth, has more oil than any other locale. Timber, gold, you name it. And because of poor policies, they've destroyed that country. That's what we're looking at unless we change things around. We're going to make ourselves weaker. We're not going to make ourselves stronger in this administration.
Well, and I would add to that, what was one of the very first things that Hugo Chavez did when he took power? He took control of the oil and gas companies.
That's it.
You have a government that takes control of your energy, they control your lives. Look at what is playing out right now in the Ukraine with Russia. What are the folks in the European Union doing? What are they saying? They're scared to death to act because they are dependent upon Russia for their energy. And that's what has made for a very dangerous world. We have empowered by our policies with this administration and the Obama administration, which was also an absolute disaster in this area. What have we done? We have empowered the thugs of the world, and we have emasculated the countries that actually believe in freedom and in prosperity. So that is where we are. When you put people like Joe Biden in office and the people that he's brought with him, you make for a very dangerous world. But again, I'm optimistic because I know that America can fight back against that. Our eyes have been opened to transparency. We know what's happening. We can fight it. We're not going to become Venezuela.
It's simple, Sean. We have to make America great again.
And because of our ability to export oil and natural gas, we could replace Russia, we could replace other countries in the world as the world's dominant energy supplier, but it would also drive the price of oil down. That's really key, and it's key for Russia. If oil is at $40 a barrel, which it was when President Trump left office, the Russians are broke. They can't afford to go to war. War is expensive. They could not even meet payroll unless oil is at about $80 a barrel. And why is that? Because look, nobody buys anything that is made in Russia, right? Who buys Russian computers, Russian cars? Nobody. And so we knew that the Russians had to have high oil and natural gas prices to fund everything else. And we knew that if they didn't have it, they could never play big on the world stage. I looked at his college dissertation. So he was in the KGB during the Cold War. The Soviet Union collapses in the late 80s, early 90s. Vladimir Putin resigns from the KGB, goes to grad school. Most people today, right? Anyway, so he went to grad school, and in his dissertation, he wrote about how to make Russia great again. And his plan was to take energy industry, oil and natural gas, bring them out of the hands of the oligarchs, bring them under the state control of the central government, invest in them, build pipelines to Europe, and then use the revenues from oil and natural gas sales to make Russia great again. The way to do this, you can't just keep slapping them on the wrist. You've got to go to where it hurts. American oil and natural gas could rule the world, and if we could prevent Russian oil and natural gas from exploiting Europe and making Russia rich again, I mean, that's the way to do it. President Biden sadly refused to do any of this, so he slapped on a couple of inconsequential sanctions. It won't make a difference. 48 hours from now will determine what happens in Ukraine. And the rest, then, I am worried about, and this is your area, Gordon, is what is China doing? Is China's watching Vladimir Putin gobbling up Ukraine? What are the Chinese doing? Are they looking at Taiwan?
When you push this stuff overseas, you actually destroy the environment at an accelerated rate. If you do it here in America, you protect the environment. So there used to be a saying where the Russian engineers would come over and take a look at the Alaska pipeline when it was first built, and they'd ask how much oil goes in it. And we would tell them how much goes in it, and they'd ask how much comes out of it. And our people would look at them like, well, the same amount that goes in it. And the reason is because in Russia, you don't get the same amount of oil coming out of it because it's leaking throughout various parts of the pipeline that they've built. So the environmental regulations in Russia and across other countries are nothing compared to America, nothing compared to Alaska or Wyoming. And so for those folks that say we're going to save the environment by stopping it here in America, you're going to accelerate the destruction of the environment overseas. That's what's going to happen.
That's right. What was one of the very first things that Hugo Chavez did when he took power? He took control of the oil and gas companies.
That's it.
You have a government that takes control of your energy, they control your lives. Look at what is playing out right now in the Ukraine with Russia. What is the European Union, what are the folks in the European Union doing? What are they saying? They're scared to death to act because they are dependent upon Russia for their energy. And that's what has made for a very dangerous world. We have empowered by our policies with this administration and the Obama administration, which was also an absolute disaster in this area. What have we done? We have empowered the thugs of the world, and we have emasculated the countries that actually believe in freedom and in prosperity.
Think about this. Joe Biden promised unprecedented sanctions after a bloody Russian invasion. If you want to avoid war, you need to impose crippling sanctions before the war starts. He's done neither. The key to the Ukraine conflict and the symbolic core of the growing turmoil in Europe has always been energy, and specifically the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. It's a pipeline that will carry natural gas across the Baltic Sea from Russia to Germany. But what it really is a pipeline of influence. It is a pipeline that makes Germany and Europe dangerously dependent on Russia for its energy. The Nord Stream 2 pipeline is still not operational. It is still our most important leverage point over Putin. But sadly, the Biden diplomatic team refused to use it before the Russian invasion. Joe Biden and Democratic senators dropped the sanctions on Russia's pipeline, creating the precise moment Putin saw American weakness.